Welcome to Question Time. Tonight we're in Hackney in London. On tonight's panel, Suella Braverman, Attorney General for England and Wales, former Brexit Minister and Chair of the European Research Group of Tory MPs. Shabana Mahmood, a Birmingham MP since 2010, previously Shadow Minister under Ed Miliband, now National Campaign Coordinator for the Labour Party. Comedian, writer and political commentator Geoff Norcott. Miatta Fahnbulleh, economist and chief executive at the left-leaning New Economics Foundation, and Formula One racing driver, currently with Aston Martin, 4 times world champion and the youngest driver to hold the title, Sebastian Vettel. Welcome to my panel, welcome to the audience here in Hackney, great to see you, and of course welcome to you at home as well. Do join in the conversation in the usual way on social media at BBC Question Time. Let's hear what you've got to say. OK, our first question tonight is from Daniel Truen.
With the cost of living continuing to increase and reports that 1.5 million households will soon see food and energy bills exceed their disposable income, when is the right time for the government to intervene?
Shabana.
Well, Daniel, the government should have already intervened. They've literally just done the Queen's Speech, which is their legislative programme, that is to say the laws that they want to make for our country in this next parliamentary session. And they've got nothing in it to deal with the cost of living crisis, which is the #1 concern of pretty much every household all over the country. It's an absolute disgrace. The Prime Minister and the Chancellor could have taken steps just a few months ago in the spring statement to deal with the cost of living crisis, to ease the burden of that cost of living crisis on working families all over the country. They did nothing. They could have done something ahead of the local elections. We've just had those a few days ago as an offer to the people of this country to say, you know what, we're on your side, we're going to help you all out. They did nothing. And now they've just had the Queen's Speech. And there's nothing in that to help people all over this country deal with the #1 crisis that is facing this country. It's an absolute disgrace. All we've had from the Chancellor today is a little bit of leaning into the possibility that he might take some action on a windfall tax. So oil and gas producers in our country are making billions of pounds worth of extra profits, money that they have themselves said that they don't know what to do with. And we have been calling for months now that the government should have a one-off windfall tax on these oil and gas producers, on their excess profits, and they should put that money towards taking up to £600 off everybody's bills. That is an offer that they should have stolen our idea, and they should have already stolen it and put it in the Queen's Speech.
Yeah.
Look, I'm a natural Conservative voter that voted Conservative since 2010, but the last election, I didn't vote Conservative. I spoiled my ballot paper. I wasn't ready for the alternatives. But, you know, I think Labour talking about a windfall tax, if you're looking for a solid left-wing policy, it's a one-off thing. It doesn't really solve what we're told are going to be ongoing higher prices.
And not just a left-wing policy, Conservative government.
Yeah, and I think it's got popular support. I think a lot of people would support it, but I think it's a one-off. What I'd say to Suella is the Conservative Party seem absolutely terrified of doing Conservative things. Why is VAT still at 20%? That was supposed to be an emergency rate. You could cut that. That would immediately put money back in people's pockets. Why are we raising corporation tax as we're coming out of the EU and out of a pandemic and making ourselves less attractive to business? And why don't you bring forward this income tax cut? You've already announced it. Bring it forward, because these are things, I think, that will put money back in people's pockets. And right now, that's what people need.
OK, Suella, I'll come to you in a moment. Let's hear from our audience first. Yes.
You mentioned the windfall tax. Surely that windfall tax should be going, yes, to the people that need it, but also we should be using that money and investing that in sustainable energy so that we don't have these price hikes.
OK. Man there in the glasses.
I think the national insurance increase, which was implemented earlier last month, that should be reversed out, the 1.25% increase. Plus, I think the government needs to tax the online sales tax, for example, Amazon or the Google, for example. These multi-corporations, they're hardly paying any taxes.
OK. Man here in the check shirt.
Yes, I think that these big companies or these energy companies that are making a lot of profits during difficult times, I think the government should solicit their solicit help from them to help people facing hardships. And apart from that, we also have other issues like climate change, things that that requires a lot of like upfront cost, like a lot of investment. So I think we need all these energy companies that are making a lot of profits during this time to actually chip in to like support the economy and help people and the environment.
Okay. Sebastian.
Well, I think there's exactly the same debate and the same questions. They are very fair being asked in Germany, and certainly the latest developments with the situation in the Ukraine, with the war in the Ukraine, have sparked a lot of talk, because the energy prices have, the energy prices have gone up, and therefore people have less money in their pockets, which I think is very easy and clear to understand. Now the question is, what do you do with it and how do you fix it? And I think it's a bit of a bigger picture thing. In truth, it's probably fair to say that action should have been taken a long time ago already, and we shouldn't depend on prices that basically the UK or Germany or any country doesn't dictate. It's the prices that we and people and households all over the UK, Germany, other countries depend on. So I think there's a really ongoing and interesting debate, and certain terms or certain certain things have been mentioned, like how do we source our energy, where do we get our energy from? And I think it's pretty similar in the UK. You have a mixture of gas, coal, and oil, and it's the same in Germany. Obviously, Germany is very dependent on Russia, and now potentially in trouble. What do we do with it? Is there going to be an embargo? How do we go forward? What do we do if Russia turns the tap off? A lot of questions. But the truth is that we should have tackled these dangers and threats already a long time ago. We shouldn't be as dependent, and we have to shift into the next gear and get ready for the future, not just for the reason of becoming independent and protecting these households that we're speaking about, but also to look after the bigger picture and making sure that we live on a planet that is as enjoyable to tomorrow as it is today.
And do you think Germany should, since you're talking about Ukraine, do you think Germany should cut off Russian gas?
It's a very tricky one, because obviously you don't want to provoke Russia to act in a way that has consequences on all of us.
And Germany is so dependent on Russian gas.
And Germany is so dependent. So the truth is we're far too dependent, and there's exactly the debate, like how far do you go? Is it actually possible to turn off the tap tomorrow? Probably yes for a while, because now the summer is coming, but what do you do next winter? We don't have gas terminals to storage gas, for example. So as I said, in truth, I think now it's a bit late to raise these concerns, because I think there's a lot of people that have raised these concerns a long time ago, and the energy that we use today, we are far, as I said, too dependent, and we should think of energy like peace energy or freedom energy, which is renewable energies. So that's, I think, the future, not just for an independent way of protecting households and protecting people that can't afford to pay the bills, but also to shift, as I said, into the future.
Suella, lots of suggestions you're hearing from the panel, from the audience, as to what could be done about the cost of living. There was a meeting of the Cabinet in Stoke today to discuss the cost of living. You were there, I think.
I was, yes.
So what did you come up with?
Well, I don't comment on private meetings, although we did have some cameras there, actually.
Well, were any of these suggestions that you were hearing here, did any of those get any support?
Well, listen, I mean, no one's going to sugarcoat the reality. Times are tough. Everyone is facing challenges when it comes to the cost of living. Food prices are going up, energy bills are rising, and that's because of a variety of factors. Inflation is rising, not just in this country, in the US and the EU, they're seeing similar patterns. And we're also dealing with the aftershock of COVID and the huge amounts of expenditure that we put in, rightly, to support the country through those difficult times.
And the question is, when is the right time for the government to intervene?
Right. Well, Shabana's been a bit disingenuous, and we've already intervened. We've put forward a £22 billion package to help people, particularly families on the lowest income, through these challenges. Nothing's off the table, and we're always going to be considering what more we can do. But whether it is raising the national living wage, whether it's the household support fund, whether it's the £150 rebate to help with energy bills, whether it's the cut and the freeze to fuel duty, these things all add up. Thousands of pounds can be saved by the average family. A single mother on the national living wage with 2 children who's renting will actually be £1,600 better off this year compared to last year because of these cumulative changes. Can I finish? Can I just finish? And I think so.
Even with inflation running it up to 10%.
No, the reality is that we are taking into account inflation, and these changes.
So hang on, people are laughing when you're saying that, Suella. I just wonder what your response is.
The reality is there's a massive package of measures designed to help those on the lowest income so that they can get through these difficult times. Would I love to do more? Of course I would. But we've also got to work within our means. We've got to pay for the backlogs in the NHS, and we've got to invest in our social care. But equally, we need to ensure that we want to keep taxes down. To Geoff's point, I'm a Conservative because I want to keep more of your money in your pockets, not the government's. And we do want to ensure that we push taxes down. And on Shabana's point about the windfall tax, I just have to answer this point.
You are literally making numbers up. You are literally making numbers up.
The windfall tax is not... I mean, the government has made clear, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor have said they're considering all options, but I just want to challenge Labour's proposal. They want headlines because they're desperate to say something on this subject. They don't have anything else to say. Rachel Reeves has made clear they're only going to raise £1.2 billion from their proposed windfall tax. With 28 million households, that works out at £42 per household. It's peanuts. £600, again, Rachel Reeves has accepted that will only reach a minority of households. So let's make sure that if we are going to apply windfall tax, that we make sure it works and it gets to the people who really need it.
Miatta.
Look, when you top up all the measures that the government has put in place, families, on average, are still £1,100 worse off. So your numbers are literally made up. They're literally made up. And, you know, the analysis that we've done at the New Economics Foundation suggests that this year, 1 in 3 households and half of all our children are going to struggle to afford bread and butter things, are going to have to make day-to-day sacrifices just to stay afloat. And it doesn't feel like the government has grasped the scale of the challenge, because if you had, you would have acted by now. And you talk about the lowest families. The Chancellor took £1,000 from those families last year, and then in the spring statement that we just had, there was literally not a single measure that would support families on the lowest incomes in this country. And there are things that you could do to act, and you're choosing not to, but there are things that you could do. So that windfall tax is a legitimate thing that you could do. Use that to bear down on bills for the next year to 18 months, whilst we have a Great Homes Upgrade, a national programme of home insulation, so we can insulate millions of homes over the next 3 years. And then you combine that with a £15 billion package to boost to benefits, so that families that are at the sharp end of this crisis, that the Chancellor has left to languish, where people are moving well beyond the choice of heating your home or feeding your kid. They're not doing either. And for me, when we have families on the brink, when we have children going into destitution, when 2 million people in the richest country in the world are skipping meals because they can't afford it, the fact you're not acting, I think, is unforgivable.
There's a lot of hands up. Let's hear from the woman in the orange top. Yes, there.
Yeah, hello. My name is Fatou. I live here. I'm a single mom, and I also own a business. And when you mention, well, we're going to be better off, I don't know where you got all those statistics, but I can tell you I run a social enterprise, and at the moment, we're definitely worse off. The thing is, there is more people going on universal credit, working moms going on universal credit because we cannot afford to rent our houses here, because the renting, the houses rent is so high, and there is nothing we can do. I'm not talking even about the childcare issue, because at the moment, the government wants us to go back into work. However, the childcare cost is so high and there is no help on this either. And do you know that also there is more people, working people, that are actually going to food banks now in our days as well? So
I'll let you back in a minute. No, let me just hear from all the others, I'll let you back in. The woman in the green top here.
You mentioned about the Conservative government wanting to keep money in our own pockets, but like one of the panellists said, VAT has been at 20%. That was supposed to be a temporary measure. Why haven't they brought that back? Also, are politicians out of touch with humans? Because, to the general public, because we had last week, we had one politician. Last week, we had one politician say we should be buying value-branded supermarket products. This week, we've got another politician telling us the only reason we're using food banks is because we don't know how to cook. How out of touch are the politicians?
The man there in the blue shirt and the jacket in the middle there, yes.
Yes, so I think the answer to the question, the original question, is actually now. Now, we need to do something now about it. My stepdaughter and my grandson are obviously a single parent on benefits down in the south coast, and her electric and her gas has quadrupled over the space of, what, a month? It's ridiculous. She's struggling so hard, and it's us, my wife and I, who are sort of helping her or them out and keeping them afloat, when we shouldn't really be doing that. We should be looking after ourselves, surely.
Okay, and the woman next to you in the glasses.
Yeah, we know that children who experience adverse experiences when they're younger, it equates to trauma. So we've got children that are living in poverty now, who are looking at their parents struggling, who are looking at the mental health difficulties their parents are going through. Everything that's happening to these children now is just going to affect them later on. I'm a CAMHS nurse. I work in child and adolescent mental health. And the stress that these children are under because their parents are under so much stress is outrageous, and I think it's absolutely abhorrent that the Tory government are not able to see this and put the funding where it's needed. And I also just wanted to say that the Tory government need to actually be truthful about the things that they are putting in place. So this £150 rebate that people are getting, it's not a rebate, it's a loan, and yet the Tory government still say it's not a loan. But I wouldn't expect anything less from a Tory party who's got a leader who lies all the time anyway, so...
All right, Suella, I better let you come back in.
Well, I mean, with respect to the lady who talked about childcare, it's not fair to say there's absolutely no help for childcare costs. We pay millions of pounds every year for 15 hours or 30 hours of free childcare for 3- and 4-year-olds. There are hundreds of thousands of families who actually are not aware of it or they don't take it up. I would take, with respect again to the lady with the green top, there are many people, I meet them in my surgery and in my constituency, who are not aware of things which are available to them which will help with the cost of living. So whether it's childcare, whether it's free school meals, whether it's, as I say, hardship funds. If you're on universal credit, there are a large number of schemes that you can access. Cheaper broadband. There are about 4 million people in this country who are not accessing the funding provided by the government that will help them save £140 a year on their broadband. There are funds for heating, there are funds for water bills, there are loads of things that you can access if you have the knowledge. And to the lady about the food banks, I think the point which was being made by my colleague about food banks was an important one, actually, which is this. There is a real need for many people, and it's not a stereotype, and it's not a stigma, and it's not a slur, for all of us to learn better and smarter techniques to save money, whether that's cooking more at home or whether that's getting a meter which will regulate how much energy you're using so you know what your expenditure is on your energy bills, whether it's, as I say, accessing some of these funds which are available through your local authority. I've come across too many people now who are not aware of the household
that's not acceptable.
Fund. That is, we've doubled that to millions of pounds, hundreds of millions of pounds, which will go directly to some of the poorest people in this community who can access it through their local authority. Not many people know about that.
I'm sorry, Suella. People at the sharp end of the cost of living crisis have already made all the changes that they can possibly make. They're already buying value brand goods. They're already buying the yellow sticker foods. We've heard about pensioners who go out all day on the bus so that they aren't at home and using energy at home that they're then going to have to pay for. So the people at the sharp end of this crisis are already taking every step possible. It's time that the government showed that it will be on their side, have a windfall tax, give people immediate relief with some money off their bills, and then make the long-term changes that are needed to help our economy be more sustainable in some of the ways that Sebastian suggested earlier on. It's all a government choice. At the end of the day, the government can act, it can do more, it chooses not to.
Okay. Very brief, because I want to move on.
Suella, do you actually think the government's doing enough? Just yes or no? Do you think the government is doing enough?
As a
yes
politician,
or no?
I meet people who are struggling to pay their
It's just
bills.
a yes
I get
or no.
it and I
It's just
understand
a yes or no
I would
answer.
love to
Do you
do
think
more.
the government's
I would
doing
love
enough?
to do more, but we have to make sure we do it in a sustainable way. We've got huge amounts of debt that we are paying already. It's not fair always to raise taxes. I have to think, we have to really challenge this assumption that we should just tax. That doesn't help wealth creation. That doesn't help job creation. That doesn't help people aspire and share the proceeds of growth and invest in public services.
40 years, got the highest tax burden. So don't sit there and say that the reason why there is a problem is because people are being taxed too much, or the problem isn't fixing it with taxing people. Then the Labour Party is saying to tax people, you are charging the highest amount of tax to this country. That is your fault.
Let me let someone else come in. Geoff.
I think the gentleman makes a fair point. And I ask this in an open spirit, Shabana. Is obviously, you talk about my problem with the windfall tax is that it is just this one-off thing and people's bills are ongoing. The thing with VAT is that is ongoing. That's money back in everyone's pocket. And I would also say to Suella, when people are on a budget, you spend that money. All right? If you're worried about people saving it, the cost of not doing something now in the form of a deep recession will cost you more in the long run. So I think also, would the Labour Party consider a cut to 20%? I just don't know if there's a position on it.
So we
briefly, Siobhan, because then I want to move on.
So we made the proposal on the windfall tax because the oil and gas producers themselves say they're making so much money they don't know what to do with it. Just a moment.
No, just answer that because then I'm going to move on.
Well, look, is there any position?
No, we will consider all options.
Okay,
if we were
you'll
about to form
consider
a government.
Okay.
But you know, at the moment, windfall tax, that's the way to help people.
You don't have a position on it, but you'll consider it. Okay, I'm going to move on. But before I do, I just want to tell you where we'll be next week, which is Liverpool. And the following week, we will be in Belfast. So that's on the 26th of May. For Liverpool, if you do want to come and be part of the audience, and we'd love to see you, apply the Question Time website in the usual way and come and be part of the programme. OK, let's take another question now from Matty Bolton.
With the Attorney-General's approval yesterday to rip up parts of the bilaterally agreed Northern Ireland Protocol, is it now clear that Johnson's oven-ready deal is still firmly in the freezer?
Right, well, Suella, since we've got you here, you are the obvious person to ask about this. So have you given approval? This was reported in the Times that you're referring to, Matty. Have you given approval to rip up parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol?
Well, there is a convention in Parliament and a convention that applies to law officers, which is that we can't confirm or deny the fact of giving advice or the content. So I'm not going to comment on whether I have given advice or not. No one in Number 10 is denying that story. Well, you can read into what you will of that story. I can't confirm it, and that is a strict convention to which I'm bound. However, what is undeniable and what is clear is that there are real problems in Northern Ireland caused by the EU's interpretation and application of the protocol. We signed that agreement in good faith. It brought an end to an interminable constitutional crisis, but it's become abundantly clear after several months and years of trying to negotiate with the EU to find a solution to the problem that actually we've got a border erected down the middle of our country. A border which applies checks, applies costs, applies extra bureaucracy for people who want to trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. It's like saying, if I want to send something from Hackney to Cardiff, I've got to pay extra tariffs and checks and bureaucracy. It's unthinkable. We've also seen...
I mean, it's worth pointing out that the Northern Ireland Secretary came on Question Time and said there was no border.
Well, we have seen, the aspiration was for no border, but we've seen that through the EU's application of the protocol, a border has de facto been erected. I must say, what we've also seen is a wholesale collapse of the political institution governing Northern Ireland. We've seen the Stormont executive collapse because the majority of MLAs, the members of the executive who are unionists, refuse to support the protocol and refuse to take part in that executive. That's a precondition for the Good Friday Agreement. That is damaging the Good Friday Agreement, the foundation of peace. It is damaging the delivery of services for the Northern Irish people. It's damaging trust in Northern Ireland as part of the United Kingdom. And as a government and as a Conservative, a proud Conservative and Unionist Party member, I cannot sit by and watch the breakup of our United Kingdom.
Matty, you look anxious to come back in.
With due respect, Suella, it's almost like we're living in a multiverse. I think what you fail to remember is that this is a deal that the UK government wanted. They signed it. This is something that Boris Johnson signed off. The EU didn't ask for the Northern Ireland Protocol. This is something that the British government and UK government put forward to the EU to solve that. So using the rhetoric of the EU being an issue, this isn't their problem. You put this in front
I'll
of
get
them.
round, I'll get round. I will come back to you. I will come back to further comments. Miatta.
Look, for me, the idea that we could renege on the first post-Brexit deal that we've done is completely mad. You know, for one, it would undermine our ability to strike other deals because who would trust us? Secondly, it would undermine our standing on the international stage when we are trying to stand up for the rule of law in a global Britain. And then finally, it runs the risk of a trade war with Europe that would hit people's pocket in the height of a cost of living crisis. And you are right. You know, I remember Boris Johnson saying the protocol in that deal was the best deal ever. I remember him telling us there would be no checks in the Irish Sea. And it looks like that was a con. It looks like that was a con. And it is his mess. For me, the buck stops with him because he negotiated, and it's him that has to solve this, and it's him that has to sort it out. And there is a way. You know, the UK Trade and Business Commission has put forward a proposal that said if we use veterinary agreements, if we use standard protection standards, we can essentially remove a lot of the checks in the Irish Sea. So there's a way forward, and the government needs to stop playing politics. You need to stop gambling with the Good Friday Agreement. You need to get round the table with the European Union, and you need to negotiate.
With the EU for the last 2 years.
This is a mess that you've created. It is a mess that you are going to have to fix.
Several proposals. You talked about a multiverse, but Miatta, you're in a different universe there. If you think we haven't put forward proposals, we've put forward several proposals contained most recently in the command paper of last year. Practical, pragmatic, cost-effective, would satisfy both the EU's respect for their single market, which we do respect, and also the integrity of the United Kingdom, keeping Northern Ireland in the customs union, customs territory of the UK. They've been rejected. They've been rejected time and time again. That is not the behaviour of a reasonable negotiating partner.
Yeah, have you put forward the UK Trade and Business Commission's proposal?
We've put forward the proposals set out in our command paper, which make it clear how a new regime of trading routes could be arranged, making clear that those goods which are going to end up in the EU, the Republic of Ireland, should be subject to some light touch checks. But the majority of goods which cross that border do not need to be subject to those checks. Trusted trader schemes, authorised economic operator schemes are proven methods that work on borders like this. There is a workable way forward. I'm sorry that the EU has rejected it.
Sebastian.
Well, I mean, I'm not familiar with all the details, but...
Come on,
to be honest,
wade into this argument, Sebastian, why don't you? We've been talking about it for years, haven't we?
I think, you know, sometimes I'm sitting like I'm generally interested, and sometimes I'm sitting and listening to this, and I'm thinking, well, you're missing sort of the bigger picture. You know, we were speaking about the energy costs earlier, and the bigger picture is clear that for the future, it is not sustainable to pump oil, gas, and
but
coal
on this
out of the
particular
ground.
issue.
I know, but my point there was the solution is you have to, you know, do the shift moving forward. And, you know, in a way, it's the bigger picture. Obviously, there was a push, 3 little words, get it done or get Brexit done. And this is sort of the consequences you deal with now. And yeah, you know.
How does it look? I mean, you're German.
Not
How does
good.
it look from the German
Not
perspective?
good. Like, you know, but I think the majority of German people don't understand. I think, you know, there's some things might be better, some things might be worse. I'm not the best judge here, but what I can see is that, you know, looking at the size of problems that is ahead of us on so many levels, whether it is, you know, the environment, social justice, looking after people, we need to do this together. We will not pull this off, just one of us. And that's where I don't understand the push for Brexit and say that, you know, we will take care of ourselves and everything will be great. I think, yeah, obviously, as I said, I'm not familiar with all the exact details, but in the bigger picture, you know, now you're in this mess, well, you got to deal with it.
Shabana.
But I guess, you know, doing what we're doing today or this evening, just talking to each other, there's always an option to talk to each other. So if there's something you're upset about, talk to each other and talk to the EU. I mean, you did that for a long time.
That's exactly what we're doing, isn't it, folks?
Longer than you thought you will need to talk to the EU to sort this out. But, you know, maybe it's good to go back and talk it again. I don't know, so...
Shabana.
Suggestion.
I think it's probably a forlorn hope. on my part, but I do think it's high time that the Prime Minister might actually, for the first time in his life, live up to and own his own failures here. This was his deal. He said it was the best deal ever. When Suella was answering the question, she sort of implied that this deal happened to us and we just had to turn up and sign it. The Prime Minister and his team were active participants in the negotiation of this deal. They own every single part of it. If it has failed, it is on the Prime Minister and his government, and they need to live up to that failure and now try and do something about it. And there is actually a landing zone for an agreement that would deal with 80% of the friction problems that we're having in terms of trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, the flows primarily of food and other produce. So this is what Miatta was referring to when she said this veterinary deal. This basically comes down to food standards. And we currently have the same food-related standards that we had when we were in the European Union. They are very high standards. The government has always said to everybody, we're going to stick with those standards. So if we're going to stick with those standards, we should just have that in an agreement with the European Union and just eliminate 80% of this problem overnight. The red flag that I see, because the government won't do this deal that exists in this landing zone between us and the European Union, is actually perhaps they might be wanting to lower those standards in future. And if that is their real game, they better start telling people, because that will be news to food and farming producers all over the country. It'll be news to most of us as well. But if that's what they're planning on doing, they should say so now.
Woman there, with her hand up. Yes, you.
Well, this issue, along with the majority win of Sinn Féin in Northern Ireland, do you think this will lead to United Ireland because they feel that they will be better as a united Ireland, as it's a geographical area separated by a sea anyway, and that they will profit more from being part of the European Union?
OK. Man here in the front of the sweatshirt.
Practical, pragmatic and cost-effective was how you saw the Irish one. I'm not a Theresa May fan, but very few people are, I think, but did her deal not deal with Ireland, Northern Ireland better? But Boris Johnson had to vote against it and the ERG for him to get the key to Downing Street. So is it not on Boris Johnson because he voted against May's deal, which dealt with it better than his one did?
The man at the back in the yellow shirt.
I don't know what's changed since I went to school, but Northern Ireland was always part of Great Britain. So for the EU to start negotiating and introduce this border, what's it got to do? We don't have a problem with stuff going from England to Wales or England to Scotland. So as Northern Ireland's part of Great Britain, why should we have this border? Why don't someone grow a pair and tell the EU to go and sling their rock? Because it's part of the Great Britain, it's not part of the EU. Southern Ireland is, but Northern Ireland ain't.
Geoff?
Yeah, as a comic, I think everyone would be pleased to. I'll keep this mercifully brief.
Well, you voted for Brexit, Geoff, didn't you? If I
did vote
so
I think,
are you pleased with the way the Northern Ireland Protocol has turned out? Or do you think it should be ripped up?
I think Northern Ireland's part of the United Kingdom, if I'm not mistaken. I think, look, when we got to the point of exiting the EU, I think neither side wanted no deal. I think anyone sensible wanted there to be some sort of deal. Yeah, and Boris said it was oven-ready. Like most oven-ready meals, it's only partially cooked. So there was always going to be elements of it. I think we knew that there were going to be elements of it to iron out. And if I'm not mistaken, there are provisions, Suella, like certain articles that if a superior arrangement, I think it's Article 13, I've done my Wikipedia research. Article 13, that if a superior arrangement is possible, then that can be entered into. Now, the EU sometimes get portrayed as sort of like a kindly band of sort of hippies. They're not. They're an economic and political union, and they're entitled to leverage this for their own benefit on that basis. Whether you should be doing that with somewhere as politically sensitive as Northern Ireland is a completely different question. And I don't think it is unreasonable to look a better arrangement. But I do think, Suella, is that, and I think it's time that politicians do start being honest, that there'll probably be a price Britain has to pay as a concession.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I think that there's so many good points, but I think that, you know, you talked about perspective. The economy of Northern Ireland is worth less than 1% to the whole EU economy, but yet the number of checks that they are applying on the Irish Sea is totally out of proportion to that and is disproportionately bigger than the number of checks they apply on the rest of their EU border. It doesn't make sense. And therefore, I think it's only right that we do take action. We have tried in good faith for over a year now to try and find a negotiated alternative. We've put forward arrangements. They've been flatly rejected.
So can I ask you, do you think it would be, you said, and I understand why, that you don't want to talk about what you've decided in relation to the Northern Ireland Protocol, but you can tell us whether or not you think it's a good idea to rip up parts of the Northern Ireland Protocol.
Well, again, I think ripping up is an inflammatory way of putting it, to be honest.
Discarding them or setting them aside, however you want to
It's taking action if this does actually go forward, because there's a decision yet to be made, I have to be clear, and that is a decision for government and the whole of Cabinet. But at the moment, and looking at the way things are at the moment, taking action to protect Northern Ireland within the integrity of the United Kingdom, taking action to remove the burdensome checks and bureaucracy on the border, which is causing traders to stop trading with Great Britain and, in fact, move their trade to Northern Ireland, taking action to try and re-establish the place of the Good Friday Agreement so that both communities feel part of Northern Ireland and the east-west connections are preserved just as strongly as north-south.
So I think this is a long way of saying yes.
I think that action is becoming painfully apparently necessary.
OK, I'm going to take another question. From Christopher Moll.
Has Europe become safer or more dangerous with today's announcement that Finland has formally applied to join NATO?
Is Europe safer or more dangerous? What do you think?
I'm sort of old enough to remember the sort of 80s and the Cold War and the face-off between the Soviet Union and the West. And I have to say, particularly for my kids, that this situation scares the hell out of me. But I think also we're in a situation here where you have a playground bully. And as we all know, when we've been in that situation, you need as many people in the playground to stand up to that bully as is possible.
Miatta.
Yeah, I have to say I agree with you. I think, with everything that we've seen in Ukraine, it's completely understandable that Finland and probably Sweden want to join NATO. It is the one thing, by the way, that Putin did not want. So I think he has spectacularly shot himself in the foot. But it does, I think, represent a new escalation. It does represent a new relationship with Russia that does take us back to the Cold War, with all the insecurity that is associated with that. So it does feel like a really scary time. And I think in all of that, the priority has to continue being Ukraine, who aren't in NATO, but are in this bitter, brutal war that unfortunately feels like it's going to last for a long time. And we've got to continue supporting them, and that's about military support, that's humanitarian support, and that's about support to rebuild when we get to it. And I think there is an onus for all countries to continue putting under pressure on Russia, and that is about sanctions on him and his oligarchs. I think we've got to try to reach out to democratic forces in Russia who are very clear that this war is not in their interest. And then ultimately, for me, we've got to stand up to him. And part of that does come back to energy. I think the fact that Europe is reliant on Russian oil and gas is a big problem. I think we should be getting rid of Russian oil and gas anyway for net zero reasons, because I don't think we can do it if we're serious about it. But there is an urgency now, and our ability to stand up to him and our ability to negotiate anything with him, I think, is hugely encumbered by the fact that we're so reliant on energy.
Sebastian, has Europe become safer or more dangerous with Finland applying to join NATO?
Well, I know a lot of Finnish people, and Finland has a long border with Russia. And, I think Finland has been in war with Russia a long time ago. So I can completely see, the need for protection. And, the example with the playground, I think, is a good one. So you want to be protected, or then as many kids as you can be to speak up. I think the trouble really is that you don't know who you're dealing with. I mean, in a way you do, and there were so many signs, and therefore, we can question now what brought us into this mess, and who is at fault, and should we have seen the signs earlier, and so on. But one thing we mustn't forget is that Ukrainian people are suffering today and tomorrow, and for probably a long time. And hearing from firsthand from some of the families that were fleeing from Ukraine and trying to look for shelter, I cannot imagine the suffering, I have to be honest, because it's something that I cannot relate to. I've grown up in a time where there was never a war, let's say, so close. Obviously, you travel the world and you see so many places, and you know that it's a privilege to be living the way we are in Europe. So I think the first thing, rule number one, is we have to take care of Ukraine. There's been a long and heated debate in Germany, should we supply weapons or shouldn't we? In the end, it turned out yes, and Germany is supplying weapons. But yeah, the threat obviously is that you don't know, it might escalate now, it might escalate tomorrow. You don't know what, Putin and Russia, or Putin mostly, is going to do. And that's the sort of uncertainty. But I think in the bigger picture, we need to do anything we can to stop him and help people who feel threatened, or especially the people that suffer, like the Ukrainians.
Geoff?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is scary, isn't it? I mean, you talk about the potential for Finland joining NATO. This country has made a pact to defend Finnish territory. This is serious stuff. This is history-changing things. I just want to pay homage to. I mean, that I think is a bold thing, and I think a lot of that's something the government have done that I am happy with and proud of our actions in that respect. But I think also the Finnish people, it's a much bigger deal for them sharing a land border with Russia to make this decision.
And do you think, the question is, do you think Europe is safer or less safe as a result, should it happen, it looks likely it will, of Finland joining NATO?
Such a difficult question. But I do know this, is that for a long time, we asked ourselves, what will Vladimir Putin do if we do this? And we asked it in the negative. I think it's time for us to start doing things that we think are right rather than we think are safe.
So he says Russia, or what we're hearing from the Kremlin anyway, is Russia will be forced to take retaliatory steps, both of a military, technical and other nature. That's certainly what they're suggesting. Let's hear from our audience. There's a woman in the purple top.
I find it puzzling that we've signed a mutual support package with Finland and Sweden, who aren't in NATO, but we couldn't offer the same support to Ukraine, and the justification from the government was that we weren't in NATO. And it kind of speaks to a wider, I think, strategic choice by the government to support or either not fulfil contracts. We've heard from the last question with Brexit. Are we happy to go into an arrangement with Sweden and Finland because we don't think that they'll act on it? Global Britain seems to be very selective in who it wants to support.
OK. The man behind you in the sweater with the zip. Yes.
I think we could learn a lesson from Brexit on this, actually. I think the lesson we need to learn is that we're stronger together, and that definitely applies here.
OK. The man here in the front in the green sweater.
In regard to NATO, basically Britain had signed a deal to protect a lot of Eastern European countries, and they are accused of being Russophobia. And this is going back as far as 2012 when they signed the Geoff Agreement. And Putin did tell the West his plans as far back as 2007 at the Munich conference. And most people turn a blind eye and just keep on buying from him. So for every pound, every euro we give into Ukraine, we're giving 40 euros to Russia. So it's a war that we actually...
You're talking about the energy supply.
Energy. So actually Europe is actually paying for Ukraine to be destroyed.
Yeah, and that is an interesting point.
Yeah.
Because that is exactly the debate in Germany, is we are, what are we doing? We need the energy, otherwise, what about the economy and what about us and so on? But on the other hand, is that money financing the war and hurting people? So that's the very difficult point. And there is, you think about it, and when you think about it more, then it gets sort of complicated and not so easy to answer. But in the meantime, like I say, you mustn't forget the people. The people are dying, people are suffering. So we must come up with a solution. But again...
And what do you think that solution could be?
Yeah, but again, the dependency was wrong, to install that dependency in the first place. I mean, governments, you are part of, dealing with that every day. You're not alone. Like, there's a lot of people who consult you, a lot of experts, no matter what it might be. If it's on energy, there is energy experts that consult you and help you and guide you. It's not and it's fair, I find it difficult to imagine to be an expert on everything. You cannot be. So you depend on the people around you, and you pick the people around you, and then you try and make the best sort of you should make the best compromise. With Putin in Germany, I think there's plenty of reason to say, well, the choices we made were wrong. Now it's obvious to everyone, but it was already obvious to the people consulting back then. So
the choices were wrong in terms of
is
going for fossil fuels, do you mean? Or?
Yeah, just to be so dependent. I think in the UK you are very dependent on Norway as an energy supplier. So, of course, Norway looks a lot more stable and safe, but you don't know. Within a decade, Norway might... I don't think so. But what I mean is, you never know which people will be in power, will be in charge, and what they might go for. You have a good example with Brexit. Just saying in terms of the consequences and so on, it's not that easy. it might get popular, like say, oh, let's get out, yeah, let's vote out, and then people don't know or don't understand.
But it's interesting that you've talked a lot, in fact, on most of the questions that we've dealt with about energy and the need for renewable energies. And here you're a Formula One driver, which is one of the most gas-guzzling sports in the world.
Yeah, it's true. And
does that make you a hypocrite?
It does. It does, and you're right. You're right when you laugh, because there's questions I ask myself every day, and I'm not a saint. In terms of, I'm very concerned when it comes to the future. So these topics, when it comes to energy dependence, and where we're going in the future, I think that, to finish my point earlier, and not to get lost, is on energy. We need to stop being dependent, and we can, because there is solutions in place. In Britain, you have this sort of gold mine you're sitting on, which is wind, and you have the ability to increase your energy supply with wind power, solar. Now, not every country has its strengths and weaknesses. If you go to Austria, they have the Alps and they have water. They can pump it up, store it, pump it, and get it back down. But without getting caught up, and getting back to your point, yeah, it is true. So, it's something that I'm asking myself. But, I think
whether you should be racing in Formula One?
And traveling the world. There's certain things that are in my control. Certain things are in my control and certain things are not. It's my passion to drive a car. I love it. And every time I step in the car, I love it. When I get out of the car, of course, I'm thinking as well, is this something that we should do? Travel the world, wasting resources. On the other hand, we are entertaining people. During COVID, we were one of the first sports to start again, and when everybody's heads were about to explode, there were Formula One races back on. I'm not saying Formula One has this huge, position in the world to deliver entertainment. There's plenty of people, if you talk about entertainment, sports, culture, comedy, a lot of people couldn't perform, and then a lot of people missed that. And I think if we don't have that in general, we would probably go mad. But there's a lot of these questions that I ask myself. There's things that I do because I feel I can do them better. Do I need to take a plane every time? No, not when I can take the car. But like I said, there's certain things in my control and certain things outside my control.
Shabana, we got slightly off the question. Let me take you, but very interesting, Sebastian. I don't mean that as a criticism at all. Has Europe become safer or more dangerous with today's announcement that Finland has formally applied to join NATO?
I tend to agree with sort of Christopher's analysis about that we are undoubtedly living in a much more dangerous and frightening time. And it is natural, therefore, that we would seek our collective security and our safety amongst our friends and our allies. So to the extent that the Prime Minister has delivered these two deals with Finland and Sweden, the cooperation agreements, we support those. I think that's the right thing to have done, because, of course, NATO membership itself takes some time, and so these are designed to bind us over until membership might come to fruition. I think it's important that we are all united in our unshakable commitment to NATO, to our allies in NATO, and to our responsibilities as a result of being in that alliance.
But coming to the question,
yes, exactly.
Has Europe become safer or more dangerous?
Of course, there is a concern about what Putin might do in retaliation, but we have to take steps as well. We can't simply sit back and do nothing. We have to work with our allies, and we have to send a clear message back that he's just not going to get a free hit. He's done a despicable thing in Ukraine, and Sebastian is right. Our concerns, first and foremost, should be about helping the Ukrainian people, helping their government fight back, but then we also have to consider what other things we have to do to assert our collective security, and it's important that we're all united in doing that.
Suella.
Yes, I believe that Europe is safer because of the proposed accession of Finland and Sweden to NATO. I've just come back from Ukraine, and I was visiting the Ukrainian Prosecutor General, with whom I've been working over the last few months to support her work in prosecuting those Russian soldiers who will be found guilty of war crimes. And it, as Sebastian says, unthinkable. It's moving, it's unimaginable, the horrors that are going on there. Women are being raped, children, innocent civilians are being murdered and slaughtered, towns are being destroyed. There's now evidence of people being transported to eastern Russia, Siberia, and being kept in camp-style conditions and left to languish. It's atrocious what Putin is doing, and I think that what is historic about today's announcement, and I have to credit the Prime Minister on his leadership of the Western alliance in the fight against Putin is that Finland and Sweden, historically neutral countries, I mean, you can't overstate the importance of their decision to actually align themselves with NATO as the structure and the architecture of peace in Europe and of course, across the Atlantic is absolutely historic and epoch-defining, I would say. I think that ultimately we are obviously big supporters of NATO. We're one of the biggest contributors financially and militarily to NATO. We've got thousands of our own troops stationed in Estonia. And it's absolutely clear that we need to support our friends and allies in this move, and that's why we support their accession to NATO.
We've got just under 10 minutes left. I'm going to take one more question from Mahad Alassal.
Have Beergate and Partygate proven that both political leaders aren't fit for their position?
Oh, look, I think it's fair to say that, you know, what happened at number 10 was a culture. It was a much bigger thing than Beergate. Do I believe that the Labour just paused for a drink at that meeting? Probably not. I think 80 minutes is quite a long pause, really. But it doesn't compare. But what I do think is you do seem to have two parties that don't seem to have big answers to the big problems. And in some ways, to varying degrees, they seem happy to sort of slug it out, right? Instead of taking on the big issues. And I don't know how anybody else feels, but with what's happening with cost of living and with what's happening in Ukraine, I would happily just not hear anything with the word in gate in ever again.
I'm not sure that's going to happen, Geoff, but well, yes, I think that will be with us for quite some time.
Well, we've got Wagatha Christie, at least that's got a new name.
Sebastian, have you been keeping up with this? Beergate and Partygate?
A little bit, yeah. And I think that, you know, when you are in that position, there's certain things that you just can't pull off. So, you know, in the end, it is the Prime Minister who made the law and then breaks the law. I mean, if I'm just thinking, I'm a father of 3 kids and I'm trying to explain them something that I think is really important on how to behave, and I do the exact opposite, what do you think they will make of it? They won't, you know, I'm the least credible person in front of them then. So, you know, we all do mistakes, we're all human, but there's just certain things that I think come with office or with that job that you can't do, so.
One there in the middle, in the white cardi.
I think it's absolutely appalling what's going on, and he really should have resigned.
Hang on, we're talking about Beergate and Partygate, so which are you talking about?
Beergate and Partygate. So Boris Johnson really should have resigned a long time ago, and there's no excuse. There were suspicions, he lied, he denied it, and now he's been fined. And the fact that hundreds now, triple figures we're talking about, have been fined.
100, yeah.
We're now saying that actually no one in Parliament cared about the rules.
And do you think Keir Starmer should resign if he gets fined?
Absolutely. And I think he has actually said it himself. So then, if you make the rules, you break the rules, nobody in Parliament cared about the rules. So then, why are they there?
Okay. The man there in the glasses.
Well, this is an issue that's quite personal to me. I've lost family members with COVID, but also I spent the entirety...
Sorry, you said you've lost family members?
Yeah, I have. Not
COVID.
as close, but I spent the whole of 2020 in lockdown, essentially. I was a second-year uni student at the time, and I went home to look after to help with my dad because he was in the middle of going through cancer and was stuck in hospital for a whole month undergoing cancer up. And it's frankly a joke that we've had Boris going in, standing up and with cheese and wine in the garden, while we've had families across the UK going through this. And he's the person who's meant to set the agenda, set the laws. We've got the Attorney General here right now, and I'm guessing she's about to go and say that Boris shouldn't resign, which is frankly a joke. Frankly, at the moment, we've got Starmer has come out and done the right thing for once. He's come out and said, I will resign if I do this. And it just shows what a joke and a clown we have of a Prime Minister at this point, that we've got a leader of opposition who will do the right thing and resign if he gets the FPN, and a Prime Minister who's leading a party and a cabinet and a government that's received hundreds, and he himself has paid them and he won't go. It's frankly a joke.
I'd better let you answer that, Suella.
Well, what I find astonishing is that Keir Starmer originally was saying that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor should resign just because they were under investigation. And then the moment he finds himself under investigation, he refuses to apply his own standards. So I'm bemused by the hypocrisy that Keir Starmer has demonstrated throughout this whole saga. And frankly, what he says about his position now and how he changes the goalposts, I don't really care. When it comes to the Prime Minister, well, he's accepted the fine, he's paid it, he's apologised, and he's made changes in his operation. And I do think, I agree...
He won't go! He's got rid of his staff who broke the rules, but he won't go himself. We had a press secretary sacked for making a joke about it. She made a joke about a party and she had to go. He committed the crime and he won't go.
I personally agree with Geoff in the sentiment. I'm not sure completely agree, but I agree with the sentiment that actually we do need to keep perspective with the perspective.
Well, because no, but just for clarity, I thought at the time that Boris Johnson should have gone. I mean, it just seems to me on a hunch.
Well, I don't agree with that bit. Right.
OK, briefly, Suella, because I need to let the other panellists in.
I think we've got to keep perspective. As I said, I've come back from Ukraine, atrocious, horrific things happening there, and then we come back and we see this. And it just doesn't seem to be the right kind of priorities that we've got here. I'm not minimising the sacrifices that people made. Of course I'm not. But I do think the Prime Minister's accepted the wrongdoing, taken responsibility, apologised, made changes. I think it's time to move on.
Shabana, we have to be quite brief.
Well, I mean, I'm old enough to remember earlier in the programme when Suella was making a big play about her responsibilities as the government's chief law officer and the conventions that she's bound by and the sanctity of the law, and now she's just made excuses for a Prime Minister.
But hang on a minute. Wait a minute, Shabana, what about Suella's point that Keir Starmer called for Boris Johnson to resign before he was given a fine, whereas he's not offering to do the same
There is no comparison between these two things, and I'm sorry, I'm just not going to accept that there is an equivalence between these two things. The call for the resignation after the investigation was opened up, by the way, was as a result of months of the Prime Minister basically denying that anything had happened at all. It was only when the video was leaked of poor old Allegra Stratton basically laughing and cringing on camera. At least she did the right thing, by the way. She resigned
as well, and then had to change the story about whether Angela Rayner was there or whether it
was a work event.
I mean, it's one rule. Wait a minute. Hang on. If you both talk at the same time, no one can hear.
There is simply no equivalence between these two things. That's the important point here. But Keir has said very clearly, shown a tremendous amount of integrity and dignity and decency. He's a former director of prosecutions, public prosecutions. He has said if the police find that he breached the rules, then he will resign. And I think that is the right thing to do. He has shown the leadership that the country needs to see from its Prime Minister. But, I mean, we're all going to die trying.
Miatta, we've got about a minute left.
I mean, look, I think for me, the big dividing line is the fact that Keir Starmer has said he would resign, and it's absolutely the right thing to do. And I think the reason why Partygate does feel so toxic, why it makes people so angry, is that it goes to integrity, it goes to trust. It's the fact that they broke the rules, but it was the lies. It was the lies afterwards. It was the cover-up. It was all of that erodes trust in politics. And it matters because these guys make big calls that affect our lives. And, you know, so for me, you know, I teach my kids right and wrong. I teach them if you do something wrong, you take responsibility. I expect the same of our leaders. And if it was any other time, any other Prime Minister, they would have resigned by now. And we deserve better than what we have.
We are pretty much out of time, I'm afraid. There's lots of hands. You're waving your hand vigorously at the back there. OK, we've got 10 seconds left. Go on, let's hear from you.
Right. Boris, who lives in Downing Street and works there, got fined. He's paid it. Now, Keir Starmer, do you expect him to get fined, considering that he canvassed for Joy Allen, the MP, who is now the crime commissioner for Durham? Do you expect him to get a fine?
Well, I guess we'll let that question hang in the air, because at the moment we can't possibly say. But thank you very much. Our hour is up. Thank you very much to the panel for coming along this evening. Thank you to all of you here in Hackney for coming to this splendid church. It's the most beautiful venue. And, of course, thank you to you at home for watching. From Question Time in Hackney. Bye-bye.